play for everyone's enjoyment.
He is guilty of crimes, and if we had a Justice Department that was doing their job instead of spending
it's your
$10
Justice
billion
Department, Mr.
to-
President. Mr. President, you're the Republican
You're right,
in
you're
charge.
right, you're
You've got
right.
a Republican
but
running
here's
it.
what I answer this all the time, because of the fact that they have this witch hunt going on with people in the Justice Department that shouldn't be there. They have a witch hunt against the President of the United States going on. I've taken the position, and I don't have to take this position, and maybe I'll change, that I will not be involved with the Justice Department. I will wait till this is over. It's a total... it's all lies, and it's a horrible thing that's going on, a horrible thing. And yet I've accomplished, with all of this going on, more than any president in the first year in our history. And everybody, even the enemies and the haters admit that.
So Donald Trump at the beginning there was referring to James Comey. He, threatened to obstruct justice on national television, which is not something that you do every day. During that rant, he also admitted that Michael Cohen did not represent him in the Stormy Daniels case. During that rant, he also admitted that Michael Cohen did represent him in the Stormy Daniels case. He threatened Jon Tester for raising questions about Ronny Jackson's qualifications. He bragged about his electoral vote. He yelled about the media, and he hinted that he may not have gotten his wife a birthday gift. Dan, your thoughts?
I would cite this as a historic moment in the history of Fox News.
Really?
This is the first this is the first piece of public service journalism Fox has ever done. Now, they accidentally did it by just allowing our unstable president to call in and talk nonstop for what felt like a decade.
Apparently it was a half hour. It was a half hour.
For the world to see what how Donald Trump thinks. I would note that before you fill out a form for a retroactive Pulitzer for Steve Doocy, they did try to encourage Donald Trump to obstruct justice.
They did.
It was like, why aren't you obstructing justice, Mr. Trump? This is an opportunity for you. But
it's your Justice Department.
You could obstruct this justice, sir. It's wild. It is wild this man is our president. It is wild there is a news network like this that exists in the world that the president would call into. It is amazing. It is really amazing. And this will be the thread that ties Kanye and Trump together, is these are two men who put their inside thoughts on the outside.
Yeah, at one point they did ask him about Kanye because it was all over Fox basically since the whole tweet storm yesterday, and Trump said he starts talking about black unemployment and doing his usual riff on that, and he said, people don't realize if you go back in the Civil War, it was the Republicans that really did the thing. Which I guess he was trying to say that Abraham Lincoln, as a Republican, was the president when slavery ended. Just a little history lesson for all you buffs out there from Donald Trump, who's a history buff himself. So yeah, it was his usual crazy. I think it's always interesting when he calls in or he goes on television or he does one of these press conferences, because we're so used to his Twitter voice, which is like all caps ranting, barely legible, not even sure it's in English half the time. But when he calls in and he was just like yelling the whole time, and he wasn't yelling with like an adversarial reporter here. These are his pals on Fox and Friends, and he's just screaming the whole time. He's like so angry, and it's like his thoughts just move from one thing to another so quickly. He covered so much ground in 30 minutes. None of it made any sense.
It is sort of evidence the Twitter voice is his true, authentic voice.
Of course
it is whatever pops into his head. It is. He is not. Many people appear more angry on Twitter than they are in real life.
Yeah,
Donald Trump.
I'm one of them.
Equally angry on. Yeah, you are not an angry person.
No.
For those of you who have not met Jon outside the Twitterverse, he's one of the least angry people I know.
I don't yell. I don't yell. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're not a yeller. You are an all-caps Twitter user periodically, but Trump is That is truly, authentically Trump. And that's actually pretty scary. Like, it's not performance art on Twitter to rile up the base or send a message to someone or send a signal to his massive propaganda network. It is just what he is actually thinking at the moment. And the things he is thinking would be scary if it was your uncle posting them on Facebook, let alone the President of the United States posting them on Twitter.
Yeah, there's no method to the madness. No one should ever think there is. There's no attempt to distract. There's no attempt to do anything. It's just, stream of consciousness all day long. I do not want to spend too much time on this at all because it is so deeply annoying. But let's talk about Kanye. After a long Twitter hiatus, Kanye spent Wednesday declaring his love for Donald Trump while noting that he doesn't necessarily agree with him on everything. He posted a photo of him wearing a signed MAGA hat. He said that nothing changed in Chicago for the 8 years that Obama was president. Kim Kardashian jumped in to defend and explain her husband. Chance the Rapper inexplicably jumped in to say that black people don't have to be Democrats. Of course, we love Chance here. Donald Trump replied, very cool to Kanye. Don Jr. and Ivanka got in on the action. Fucking Anthony Scaramucci, who we learned from this whole thing texts with Kanye, tweeted, "We are all one race, Kanye, the human race." And the rest of us pinched ourselves but didn't wake up. Welcome to hell. Dan, what are your thoughts? I know you've always been a fan of Kanye, as I am of his music, but have always thought he's sort of a jackass, as Barack Obama once said.
Yeah, I mean, to quote Barack Obama, Kanye is a bit of a jackass.
Yeah.
I am a huge fan of Kanye's music. I have seen Kanye in concert maybe 6 times. I have listened to all of his albums many, many times. I will most certainly buy the 2 albums he has coming out and the two albums he has coming out and from himself, and the 3 albums that he produced that are coming out probably not coincidentally at the right after this return to the spotlight. But the thing that's about Kanye is Kanye is Kanye's music is beloved. I don't know. Kanye is not a beloved individual, right? He has been, and this is the one thing that Chance the Rapper said after the tweet you referenced on Twitter, which was, this is the same Kanye. This is the Kanye who interrupted Taylor Swift. It's the Kanye who said that George W. Bush didn't like black people. And we just have to accept in our culture 2 things. One, that Kanye is a jackass. Sometimes his jackassery is things we may find appealing, like when he yelled at George W. Bush after Katrina. Sometimes we may find it amusing because it's on something more generic, like the Nike-Adidas sneaker battle, or his weird desire to meet with Mark Zuckerberg, or Larry, as you said, Larry from Google. But there's also something broader about just this, the fact that all of politics stopped to talk about Kanye and Trump and what they said, and then the cable segments that launched in reaction to it, the Twitter storms that launched in reaction to it. We became obsessed with something that was incredibly trivial because we have an obsession in our country with celebrity.
Kind of like what happened in 2016, huh?
Yes, exactly. And Michael Cohen, the president's fixer, involved under federal investigation, involved in a whole host of things, yesterday indicated that he was going to plead the Fifth in the Stormy Daniels case. Now, that is his constitutional right to do so, but it is a newsworthy thing that a very intense news consumer, did not know for hours because of Kanye. And I don't have a solution to the problem of celebrity in our politics, but we should at least recognize what it is that we are always distracted by the shiny things. And in 2016, we as a culture got distracted by the shiny thing that is Donald Trump and missed some very real things that affected our election, our policy, all of that. We valued we became obsessed with the style over the substance. And it's like this is another object lesson that we have not, as a culture, learned a lot from 2016 yet.
And look, I now understand, now that we run a quasi-media company, I now understand what media companies and reporters and editors go through when they try to make decisions about what to talk about, because we sort of all had this debate here yesterday when we were writing up the newsletter, and we're like, do we put it at the top? Do we put it somewhere down in the middle? Like, well, everyone's talking about it, but then if we're talking about it, we're contributing to everyone talking about it, as you and I are doing right now. So it's really hard to figure out how to cover these things and how to talk about it, because they do get so much attention. And I would say that even as most journalists and most political observers are wrestling with that question, on the right, like, this blanketed Fox News all day yesterday after it happened. But it's interesting, like, all the MAGA trolls on Fox and Twitter were ecstatic that a black celebrity liked Donald Trump purely because they thought it would upset liberals. This was the whole thing. This is all they cared about. They don't care about issues. They don't care about policies. It's like, just own the libs so you can get more followers, so you can book more Fox hits, so you can get your own Fox show, so you can run for president, so you can own the libs more. This is like this is their reason for being on the right. And I do think that, like, if we, as a culture, we're very vulnerable to celebrity sort of taking it over. But you realize, like, this Republican Party, Trump's Republican Party, they don't have, it's not even like Paul Ryan and his obsession with tax cuts. Like, he's got something that wakes him up in the morning that's policy related. We all hate it, but he's got it. The Trump's Republican Party and the one you see on Fox News and everything else, there are no issues, there are no beliefs, there are no ideology. It's just like everything they do is to piss off liberals, and whatever they can do to do that and to troll people, they will pursue that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think we have a tendency, and I mean me in particular, sometimes you yell and you're like, why is the media covering this?
Yeah.
And you yell at the media. But that is, and I've done that many times, so let this be part of my apology tour, is it's not the media's fault. The media is often a reflection of the culture, right?
Yeah.
Their job is not to feed you spinach. Their job is to feed you things that you will read and listen to and be interested in. And the hope is you'll be interested in serious things. And so, of course, they're going to cover Kanye because we're interested in Kanye. It is as much the public's fault as it's the media's fault, it's politicians' fault for talking about this, tweeting about it. We're all part of the problem here. And it's not a switch we can turn off. Yeah. I think for Democrats, it's to sort of understand how to we're sometimes a spinach party. And how do we succeed in a culture that doesn't want spinach? How do you take what we care about and are serious about? How do we make that interesting in a world that is fueled by retweets and likes and clicks? And I don't have the right answer to that, but it is, if we do not get better at making our message viral without sacrificing who we are and what we stand for, we're going to struggle in 2020 because the Republicans are, under Trump, like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are not good at this. But Trump has built an outrage machine, and we have to build something that is not an outrage machine, but succeeds in the same environment that values outrage. Yeah,
and I've said this before, but I think on the right, one of the main drivers is fear and anger, and I don't think we should emulate that on the left. I think the way that we get people moving and get people organized and activated is with both humor and inspiration, especially inspiration. And that's sort of our antidote to their side. I don't think we should mimic them. But, you know, it's also everyone's like, well, we don't, when the whole Oprah thing happened, right? Everyone was like, well, we can't have our own celebrity to their celebrity. Well, you know what? There's a big fucking difference between Oprah Winfrey and Donald Trump and Kanye West, because she knows what the hell she's talking about and she's brilliant, right? So it's not even like, it's not just easy enough to say no celebrities anywhere, because I do think people who are widely recognized, who have a large following, could potentially be good leaders. But it has to do with, like, are your values in the right place? Do you know what you're talking about? Do you have the base of knowledge and policy and everything else to actually, you know, articulate a coherent and inspiring message? And I think that could come from someone who is just, you know, who's gone up through public service their whole life and who's been an elected official. And it can also come from someone who's outside of politics. Like, I don't actually think it's the resume specifically that's going to tell us who that person is, but it's actually what they say and what their message is and what they know.
Yeah, that's exactly Right. That's exactly right. Donald Trump's greatest flaw is not that he's a celebrity.
No.
It is the thing. It is his greatest flaw are the characteristics that originally made him a celebrity. It is vacuousness, jackassery.
It's everything you heard on Fox and Friends this morning. Just listen to that.
Yeah.
Those are his greatest flaws. Everything he said there. It's not like
and so maybe the answer for Democrats is not don't nominate someone like Oprah. It's not we need our own Trump, so let's get The Rock or Oprah.
No.
Or I don't know, someone similar. But it's also not if we have a celebrity. Celebrity's not the problem. It's not the characteristic of the candidate that is the problem. The culture's obsession with celebrity that extends far beyond politics is a broader thing that we should be aware of and think about and look at, because it's not just the obsession with Kanye's tweets. It's also the obsession with the Kardashians or the Real Housewives or
it's an obsession with
everything that people right.
It's an obsession with the trivial and the sensational over the substantive, and what really matters to people's lives. I think that's what it is. And celebrity can sometimes be a stand-in for what's trivial and sensational. But I think what you said too, it is the problem we have is that we need people to eat the vegetables, but people only want the dessert. Well, we could talk about that forever, and we will again, I'm sure. But we should talk about Dr. Ronny Jackson, who formally withdrew his name for consideration to lead the Department of Veterans Affairs this morning. This comes after Senate Democrats on the Veterans Affairs Committee released a list of allegations against Jackson that included drinking on the job, overprescribing medication, and overseeing a hostile work environment. So look, a lot of people have tweeted us about this, asked us this question, because way back in January when Dr. Jackson gave that report on Donald Trump's health, because he's Donald Trump's personal physician, number of us in the Obama world said, we know Dr. Ronny, he had been our doctor, and thought he was a great guy and a good doctor. Later, when he was first nominated for the VA, I think pretty universally in Obama world, we said, still like him, still think he was a good doctor. None of us think he was qualified to lead the VA. And then all these allegations come out, and people were like, well, did you guys see any of that when you were working with him? And the truth is I hadn't. I mean, my experience with him was when I got to the White House, the president had a different doctor, Dr. Coleman, and then Dr. Ronny was sort of in charge of being a doctor to the senior staff and sort of, helping run the White House medical unit. So I was a patient of his, and I thought he was a great doctor, took care of me. I had some medical issues when I first got there in 2009, 2010, and he took excellent care of me. And then when I was on foreign trips, see him on the plane, ride with him in the van, said hi to him. He was always very polite, very nice. I never saw him drunk, never saw him drinking. But if a lot of these allegations are coming out from people on the medical staff who worked with him and worked for him, and you can't discount those allegations. It's very possible that the allegations may be true, even though a lot of us who dealt with him, had limited experiences with him, except when he was our doctor, had different experiences, So it's very possible that the allegations could be true. I just don't know.
Yeah, that's right. I think, as was pointed out by many people, that I tweeted something nice about Dr. Jackson back in January, saying he was a really good guy and an excellent doctor who took great care of me. And he was an excellent doctor who took great care of me. As we talked about, I had serious health issues. He oversaw my care. I'm incredibly grateful to that. I saw him be a truly kind individual to a lot of people. And I might have told this on this podcast before, but there was a friend of ours who was on the White House staff with us whose father had a heart attack in Illinois. And it was very serious. And we were on a trip to Illinois right after that. And during his off time, Dr. Jackson went and met with went to the hospital where our friend's father was and met with the doctor to make sure that our friend's father was getting the care that he needed. Now, that is so far beyond the duties of the White House doctor. It was just being a good friend and colleague and person. And I always thought that was an incredible thing that Dr. Jackson did for this person who was not above Dr. Jackson on the food chain, or from just someone that he spent time with. And I thought that was really, that meant a lot to that person, to a lot of us who were friends with him. Now, as you said, I can only speak to what I saw, right? As someone that I traveled with and someone that was my doctor. And those experiences were always good. Now, these other allegations are troubling, and I think it's important to get to the bottom of them. Some reporter asked me the other day, was this like an open secret? Because that happens sometimes where it's like, it's not reported, but everyone kind of whispers, right? And some of these journalists who have been accused of sexual misconduct, it's been talked about like, oh, everyone kind of knew that person was, and certainly we've had, whether it was, Anna Marie Cox and others who've been on this podcast will talk about that. Everyone, like, among people knew that was someone that you wanted to stay away from, right? It was like an open secret that spilled out. Based on my time, and I left in 2015 and you left in 2013, that was not an open secret. I was shocked to hear all of these things. And so I think it's important, even if he's not going to be the VA nominee, which is a position that we all questioned his qualifications for, at least on paper, that people get to the bottom of this and find out what's true. And if these things are true, then appropriate action should be taken. Yeah. But we spoke to the experience that we had with Dr. Jackson, and that may end up not being a full picture of his performances in that role. And so that is obviously troubling. Yeah.
And, I will say, he did, and sometimes we miss this in politics, just like in real life, people are complicated, and it is completely possible that Ronny could have been a good doctor to some people and very nice to some people and very kind to some people, and also had all of these allegations some of these allegations be true and have done some shitty things as well. That's just human nature. But you're right. None of us who worked with him, and this is like me. This is not just me and you and Tommy. This is like Alyssa worked with him really closely and really liked him a lot, and a lot of our friends that we talked to. So it's really sad. The whole thing is very sad. But I'm glad that he withdrew his name from this, because no matter what we believed about him personally, he was never qualified to lead the VA, and Trump should have never nominated him in the first place. It just shouldn't have happened. Why do you think Trump did this? What do you think went wrong in this whole process?
I think Trump has no idea what the government does and what the job duties are of people in the government. And I think in Trump's view, just think about the most simplistic way of thinking about this. The VA is responsible for, among other things, providing health care to veterans. Dr. Jackson is a doctor and a veteran. Ergo, he should be the head of the VA, and he likes him. And the problem with that is there's just so much. It is just this is actually a real metaphor for just how unfit Trump is for this job, because he doesn't understand what the VA does. He made an appointment to one of the most important, most complicated, and largest departments in the government without thinking about it, just to his doctor, right? Without any real thought or process, without understanding the complications of a confirmation process and what that would mean. And because it's not just, are you qualified? It's, are you qualified? Who is the most qualified person who can get confirmed, right? And It turns out that in this case, Dr. Jackson failed on both elements. And 3 minutes of due diligence, one phone call before tweeting, he could have known this. And the real victims here are the people who depend on the VA, because now this thing is high. Shulkin was a huge problem for a whole host of reasons, and we obviously originally appointed him in the Obama administration. And you need to get someone in, and probably more than any other department, you want someone who is non-controversial, who has a bipartisan support, because these issues are not. There are debates about privatization and things like that should be had and are a big deal and important, but also there's a day-to-day management that needs to get done and fixed. And so you need a good person in there. And now that's going to be delayed for Lord knows how long, because Trump was utterly incapable of doing the most basic functions of his job.
Yeah. Yeah, no, in a normal confirmation process, you wouldn't go on a bunch of senior staffers in the White House saying yeah, he's a nice guy, took good care of me, let's make him VA secretary. They would have sat down and started interviewing all these people who worked with him, many of whom have surfaced these allegations. They would have dug into the background, dug into the record, and at some point, any normal White House, Democrat or Republican, hopefully, would have looked at that record, looked at some of these allegations, and been like, oh shit, no, absolutely not. We might have had some good experiences with him, but other people. That basic work.
I mean, this would not have solved this problem, but generally, they do not even enter their nominees' names into Google to find out anything about them. They just nominate them because they were great trolls, or they're one of the few people who supported Trump, and they put them forward. And eventually, many of them end up either don't get confirmed, or many of them have to quit because Andrew Kaczynski at CNN or others dig into their backgrounds. Turns out that they have posted on the internet, which is open to everyone, racist memes or birther conspiracies or all the above. And it's like, do the basics.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're talking about Trump meeting in a historic summit with North Korea to discuss a denuclearization deal that affects the entire world, which is the most complicated high-wire act of diplomacy and national security you can find. Yet he can't do the basics, the very basics, and the man should not be president. Like, that's just a fact.
Well, it's also,
it gets proven. We know it from Twitter, we know from Fox and Friends, but just on the basic parts of the job, he's incapable of even letting his staff, who are subpar to begin with, do very basic things because he has no impulse control.
And it's not just Donald Trump, it's all the people he has running the government. I mean, the real scandal here is not Ronny Jackson, who thankfully pulled out. It's all of the nominees who've been confirmed. Betsy DeVos knows nothing about education, doing a horrible job. Ben Carson yesterday proposed raising the rent by $100 a month on poor families receiving housing assistance. Rex Tillerson drove dozens of experienced career diplomats out of the State Department and was possibly the worst Secretary of State in history. Scott Pruitt testifying today, deeply corrupt, probably committed crimes. Mick fucking Mulvaney, the OMB director, a right-wing nut who basically put himself in charge of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau so he could destroy it, told a bunch of bankers and lobbyists that when he was a congressman, he would only meet with bankers and lobbyists who donated to his campaign. This is an actual quote. If you're a lobbyist who never gave us money, I didn't talk to you. If you're a lobbyist who gave us money, I might talk to you. Dan, you had an all caps tweet on this one upon hearing this news.
I did. Those who know me may know that I may actually be equally angry on and off Twitter. But yes, he admitted to a crime. He admitted to exchanging government services for money, and I am equally offended by his criminality and his stupidity. It does show just how corrupt they are, that they don't even know, they no longer know what they're doing is corrupt, to the point where they announce it to a bunch of people in order to encourage these banking lobbyists to give money to more Republicans so they can get better policies for Wall Street. He basically announced a previous and a future pyramid scheme, pay-for-play pyramid scheme. It's mind-boggling, and it just to do it is horrible. And look, like, I'm not naive. The mere fact of money and lobbyists, there's a lot of things in the gray area of corruption in Congress, and there is no question that people who give money get more access. But well-run offices by moral members of Congress try to avoid not just the appearance, but the actuality of corruption by having distance between those things and ensuring that giving money does not guarantee you a meeting, but it doesn't deny you one either.
Right.
And these people don't care. They just do not give a shit because they live in a consequence-free zone. There is no penalty for these crimes because there are no checks and balances, because Paul Ryan has basically given these people a corruption carte blanche to do whatever they want. And that is, it's mind-boggling that we have gotten to this point. It is mind-boggling.
And again, we always talk about drawing the line from the corruption to how it affects people's lives. Mick Mulvaney, he bragged about taking all these donations from bankers and lobbyists and then talking to the ones who donated to him. He received $63,000 from payday lenders. Payday lenders take advantage of low-income, middle-income people who don't have anywhere else to go for a loan, and they charge them huge amounts of interest, and they get them trapped in this cycle of debt. It's awful. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created. It existed to protect people from payday lenders, and it's been doing a fucking great job of doing that. And now Mick Mulvaney, who took all this money from payday lenders and had all these meetings with them and then bragged about it, puts himself in charge of this agency that he's now trying to shut down so that it stops protecting people from payday lenders, so that it stops protecting consumers from credit card companies who take advantage of them or banks who charge them overdraft fees or whatever it may be. It's outrageous. The good news yesterday, by the way, was Kyrsten Gillibrand, who's just crushing it with the policy proposals lately, proposed the Postal Banking Act, which gives everyone access to basic banking services like checking and savings accounts, ATM machines, and low-interest loans right at their post office. And this could actually end the predatory practices of the payday loan industry. It's a really great idea. You have post offices in every single community in America, and a lot of times people end up at payday lenders because they don't know where to go and they're not near a bank with an ATM or anything else. And this would mean that people could go to their local post office and do their banking there, which is really a great idea. Another cool thing about this is apparently Gillibrand heard about this idea from Mirza Baradaran on Pod Save the People. This woman is an expert in banking. She's a professor, and she started talking about it on Pod Save the People with DeRay and the crew, and Gillibrand was listening, and now she's proposed this thing, and, if Democrats take over, it could become law. So there's good news, Dan. It's not just all bad.
I mean, good news in your efforts to make crooked media the Fox News of the left is perfect. You're setting the agenda. You're making policy. It's superb.
Could you imagine, though? Yeah. Could you imagine someone being like, I heard of this brilliant idea on Fox and Friends, and now I've made it a proposal. Yeah. I guess that's what happened with the wall. This is where the wall came from.
I mean, I made a joke about Fox and Friends of the Left, which was a joke for all people on Twitter, but they don't have, Fox is not trying to, it's almost like I heard about this idea on NPR. You'd be like, that's okay. Or I heard about this idea on the Today Show. Or 60 Minutes, people would think that was normal. Fox is not a news network.
No,
and
it is not.
Obviously, Crooked Media is a media company, not a news network in the traditional sense, but it hosts conversations with interesting people. If people get good ideas from that, great. And I think it's a very interesting idea. I obviously want to learn more about it. But what I am appreciative of Senator Gillibrand for is just putting interesting ideas out there that, whether she runs or not, can be fodder for debate in 2020, because we need to come out of the 2020 election, not just with a candidate who's going to inspire people to turn out to vote against Trump, but also an agenda for the post-Obama era particularly on the economy, but across the board, right? What do we do now? What are the things that address the changing economy, changing culture, what comes after Obamacare, all of that. And we need interesting ideas. We can't just recycle the same ideas from previous elections. And so that, to me, this is interesting in that sense.
Yeah. And I think technocratic changes to the tax code and tax incentives and tax credits and the usual laundry list of sort of incremental policies, I don't think it cuts it this time. I don't think it cuts it politically. And I also don't think it is commensurate with the magnitude of the challenge that we're facing in the economy, especially for low-income and middle-income people. Let's talk about the Arizona special election on Tuesday before we get Kyrsten Sinema on the phone. Republicans won a special election in Arizona on Tuesday, and yet it might have been the best result yet for Democrats. Democratic candidate Hiral Tipirneni lost to Republican Debbie Lesko by 5 points in a district that Trump won by more than 20 points in 2016. The Cook Political Report's Dave Wasserman tweeted on Tuesday night that there are 147 Republican-held House seats that are in districts less solidly Republican than the Arizona 8th. Dan, what's your take on the special? What lessons can we learn from the results?
Well, I like winning more than losing. To be clear about that.
Yeah.
So I would much prefer Dr. Cipriani seemed like a great candidate who would have been a real interesting voice to have in Congress, and certainly better than Debbie Lesko, who pledged to, quote, make America great again. But if you were looking at this not in the context of this individual election, but what it says about the electoral environment, it is all positive for Democrats, because there have been, in each of the previous specials that people have pointed to where Democrats have won, there have been these sort of extenuating circumstances that allow Republicans to explain away why they lost. So you take Virginia. Virginia is a state that Hillary won by more than Barack Obama. So it's a state that is anti-Trump, right? Resists Trumpism. Trump didn't win it in the primary. They voted for Marco Rubio, I believe. There's no accounting for taste in that fact. You look at Alabama. Obviously, Roy Moore has had a unique set of challenges that are not replicable in other races. You look at Pennsylvania 18, which, even though Trump did very well in it and had a long history of voting Democratic, it actually has more Democrats than Republicans, even though it went very big for Trump. Conor Lamb was, by all accounts, a superb candidate. Rick Saccone was, by all accounts, a terrible candidate. So you could attribute it to individual factors specific to that race. None of those factors were present here, right? Because Arizona is a state that Trump did well in. This was a district where Republicans greatly outnumbered Democrats. This is a district, I think 80,000 more Republicans than Democrats. Mm-hmm. This was a district that had early vote, which gave Republicans when you have an enthusiasm problem, early vote gives you a lot more time to turn your voters out.
Especially because it was ballots were mailed to people for early vote too.
Yeah. And it didn't require an excuse like in Pennsylvania, I believe, and some of these other states. And Debbie Lesko, by all accounts, was a very good candidate, or certainly a generic Republican candidate.
Yes.
And despite all of those things, it performed very well for Democrats relative to past performance. And so that is a positive sign. If I were to give a lesson, I'd say the lesson is run hard everywhere. Because if the environment is like this, Democrats have a chance to win races we never thought we could race. Because this is not a Democratic district. I think, could be wrong, there's like 147 districts, I think, that are more Democratic than this one.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, also, I think it's the races they ran too. Debbie Lesko's race was, I mean, you talked about Make America Great Again. She also talked about immigrants pouring over the border and Nancy Pelosi. This is like the new playbook now for Republicans. Not really new, but and Dr. Cipriani talked about healthcare and the tax cut, and how the tax cut put healthcare in jeopardy, and put Medicare in jeopardy, and put Social Security in jeopardy. And most voters are turning out in all these elections, and the number one issue they said that brought them to the polls is healthcare. And Democrats are running on healthcare. And it remains true that the Republican attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act might be the greatest political mistake that they've made in the Trump era. I think the second biggest political mistake they've made is this tax cut, which they thought they were going to be able to run on. And now none of them are running on it. None of them are spending money on their ads on the tax cut. None of them are talking about it that much. Only Paul Ryan's talking about it as he goes back home to Wisconsin. Because they know it's not popular, and neither is healthcare repeal. And Democrats should run on those two things all the way to November. We should also note that Democrats flipped their 40th state legislative seat in New York on Tuesday night as well. So that's pretty great news. Now, what do we think about sort of the DCCC's role or lack thereof in the Arizona 8th? Friend of the pod, Adi Barkan, tweeted some frustration with the D-Trip after the loss this week. He said he was disappointed that they didn't invest more in the special election. According to Politico, the DCCC didn't spend any money on TV ads in the race. The DNC, however, did put some money into fundraising and get out the vote efforts there, which is great. So is there validity to this criticism? Should the DCCC have gotten involved? On one hand, obviously, you can't spend money everywhere. There's a limited amount of money. On the other hand, it was a 5-point loss in a district that Trump won by 20, and you wonder if a little more money invested in the race could have got Cipriani over the edge there.
I mean, this is always. Adi spent a lot of time in Arizona, and so he knows more about what's happening on the ground there than certainly I do. But I would say that in every special election that I've ever seen in my years of politics, like the analysis afterwards goes two ways. If you win, if you spend money and lose, why did you flush all that money down the toilet, right? Which is a big discussion around Georgia sticks. What a waste of money. Democrats spent millions of dollars and lost this race. And then if you come close and don't spend, then it's like, why didn't you spend the money? I just don't. The truth is, I don't know enough to know. They're going to have to make budgetary decisions about how to spend money. Mm-hmm. And it is true. Money is it's not completely zero sum, but it's kind of zero sum. And if they spend $1 million here, that may be $1 million they don't have to spend in another one of these races that may model out to perform better than Democrats. But what is great about where the enthusiasm of Democrats right now is we don't have to depend on the DCCC, right?
Yeah. We got swing left. You have swing left. You can contribute. Pick the races you want to invest in and invest in them. And there is a huge Democratic candidates are outraising Republicans up and down the ballot everywhere, fueled largely by the enthusiasm of small dollar donors. And the Republican Party establishment is raising more money from corporate lobbyists and corporate PACs that benefited from the tax cut and who are trying to maintain the status quo in Washington. So the DCCC does not determine which races get money. We do, right? Or which races get energy or field or volunteers. And I say we, meaning not President America, but we, the progressives around the country. And so we can debate this forever. Like, I don't know that another new cycle of crapping on a Democratic Party institution is going to solve any problems. Question is, if you see a candidate you like, you see a race that you think is going to win, that you're interested in, contribute. Encourage your friends to contribute. Do it through Swing Left. Do it through Act Blue. Whatever the mechanism is, in this new world, voters have as much, if not more, agency than the party institutions. Yeah, no, that's been my whole thought about the DCCC too. Like, we could complain about it all day, but when you see the DCCC doing something that annoys you, figure out a way to go around it or supplant them or contribute somewhere else or, help the candidate win in some other way. I think that's the most constructive thing to do. And I think that's happening all over the country in different races.
And it's like the DCCC has done some things like in Texas that we were annoyed by, but they've also done really good things too. They've done a really good job recruiting candidates all up and down the ballot and all across the country. And like we have to have a more per our previous discussion, a more nuanced view of our party institutions. Yeah. Right? Like, we can be, like, people scream about the DNC all the time. Many of that criticism is based on things the DNC did under previous leadership in a different election cycle. And they're not going to do everything you agree with, but they are going to do important, good things. And you can decide whether to give to them or not. But I know it is, like, cool and hip now to crap on all Democratic Party institutions. And when they do wrong things, call them out on it, but recognize that we're all on the same team here. And when they do good things, let's applaud them for that too. And so it's just, I don't want to just create this cycle of recrimination over and over again that disenchants people from the Democratic Party when there are good things happening out there. They're not perfect, but there are good things happening.
Nuance in an age of Twitter from Jon Favreau and Dan Pfeiffer. That's what we're looking for. Okay, we have Congresswoman Sinema on the line, so we will get her on the phone, and we'll be right back.